Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. How are we?
We are confused as always. We are going to work this out before it's all said and done. In the co-pilot seat tonight, of course, in the co-pilot seat
That's right.
tonight
I know.
is
I do
my
that all the time too.
esteemed colleague, Craig Ansel, coming to us from an undisclosed location in Florida. We
Yes.
are going to get better. I'm having a little of my COVID brain fog
People
tonight,
love us for this.
but I promise, the numbers are dropping. Speaking of numbers, thank you all. These Sinister mysteries have been very successful. And after we roll the opening tonight, Craig has a very big announcement that he's going to share about Sinister mysteries. Before the show, we got a shout out through YouTube from someone in Egypt who said, keep going. And all
Wow.
respect. So, international audience, people are interested
Awesome.
in these
Thanks for
Sinister
watching.
mysteries. So I'm Joey Medea, and this is
Craig Ansel, and this is Into the Outer
Into the
Realms,
Outer
Sinister
Realms. That's
Mysteries.
right. Sinister Mysteries. Into the Outer Realms, where the paranormal and supernatural are just.
Normal and natural.
That's right.
Unlike
But
my
we're gonna
promo.
let's go back to the supernormal and the paranormal tonight with Roger Bacon, and you'll see where the Sinister mysteries come in. It's not actually with Mr. Bacon, but it's the people, Dr. Bacon, right? Dr. Mirabilis, the wonderful teacher. But really the Franciscan order that he joined that I just can't figure out. So Craig and I are going to try to puzzle through that tonight. Welcome to the show. Here we go. There exists a realm beyond our wildest dreams, a realm beyond reality that the gatekeepers and guardians have always told us consists of nothing but tricks of the eye, weather balloons, swamp gas, sand cranes, fairy tale myths of monsters, crackpot conspiracy theories, and desperate cries for attention.
We know this realm exists, and it's just beyond the horizon. The preset path, the well-worn walkways where the cynics want us to stay.
Instead, give this a listen. Put on your headphones, adjust your volume, close your eyes, and fasten your mental seatbelts, because the twilight-tinged turnoff from reality's alluring highway is looming just ahead.
We're about to leave the plane of the easily explained, couldn't possibly be's, and the no way I just saw what I saw's, for the spaces and places where everything is possible, and if you stay long enough, even probable. We're about to take a journey into the outer realms. Into the outer realms where mild-mannered Franciscan scientists make weird devices like brazen heads. Maybe.
As Charles Marr said there exactly, bacon!
Bacon!
Talking about bacon!
No culinary pun intended, but I actually had bacon for dinner tonight. Wasn't even thinking, but bears mentioning. So good evening, Michael. Happy Thursday. Hello, Miss Tanya. Charles, of course, Angelina. Jessica, nice to see you. Hi, Harlan. Hello, Laura. Harlan, thank you for the birthday wishes. And CL, hello, welcome. So good group in here and everybody else who's in the chat room as well as we go along here. So Roger Bacon, this was your idea, good sir.
Yes.
What drew your attention to the esteemed Dr. Mirabilis?
Mine really is, the kind of where the research focused on was the brazen head and the claims that he was necromancer and communer with the devil. And I make no bones. I've got you can see behind me lots of stuff with the occult. Yeah. I've always had a fascination with it. I mean, if you want to know what my favorite genre movie is, it's going to be something that has to do with possessions, exorcisms, the occult. It just goes down. Those are the movies I absolutely love. Then of course it's sci-fi because obviously Star Wars.
Nice. We should
But,
do a
you know-
top 10 show sometime about our favorite occult films.
Oh yeah, no,
That'd be fun.
absolutely. I mean, we could add it to the list that we're coming up with shows.
Speaking of the list, you have a big announcement tonight before we dive in.
Yes. Starting in February, we're going to go to at least 2 of these a month instead of just one.
At least he said.
At least. So it'll be 2, and like I said, and if I find the time and the ability, you know, we'll try to sneak a 3rd one in there maybe.
Whoa!
So we'll see.
So that's really big news. We're working on some branding to really formalize. Sinister Mysteries still will reside into the outer realms, but it is a special project for us. Thank you everyone for the birthday wishes. At the stroke of midnight tonight, Eastern Standard Time, I will turn 54 years old. I'm at the point now where I don't even really keep track of the numbers. Tell you the truth, Tanya's birthday is in March, and I usually just flip my digit to be even with her in March.
There you go.
So my birthday comes along and I go, oh wait, I've been that already for 8 months now. So
yep.
Laura says, mine too, Craig, and documentaries of human trafficking, rabbit hole, celebrity demons. Celebrities and demons and all that kind of stuff. I'm working on it in my books, and maybe we'll work up to it on this show. Real quick, too, just want to let you all know while we're housekeeping on Sinister Mysteries. In January, we have precursor to MK Ultra. Craig is going to handle the Japanese side of it. I'm going to handle the German side of it. This show obviously is not for kids. It's never for kids. Tune into Saturday morning story time.
Yeah.
This won't be for the squeamish, but I will tell you it's worth it. Just like when we did MK Ultra and we talked about all the horrific experiments at Edgewood. A lot of this stuff came over from what they found in Europe and Asia after World War II.
The biggest thing too about those ones is like, even though it's hard to listen to, it's hard to stuff, you have to know it. It's just like the Holocaust. Yeah. You have to remember these things so that way we don't repeat them. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what the topic is, what this, you know, the thing du jour is right now. Well, you know, we got to get rid of these things. It doesn't matter what political aisle. You have to remember these things always end up in the same thing: death camps. It doesn't matter what, you know, whether, you know, it's Marxism, communism, it just, you go these things, Nazis, they always end up in death camps. Yeah. And you have to remember these things. And it's like, if you don't, you know, you're going to be like, I didn't see this coming. Well, you should have watched the Sinister Mysteries. You would have seen it coming.
And really on top of that, the death camps, you know, the FEMA camps and all that's been whispered about for a really long time. There's a book I'm reading now. I have a guest that's coming on between Christmas and New Year's, who's talking about that kind of thing, the 2030 population reduction agenda, transhumanism. We're going to be tackling some hard topics on this show, folks, because I can't in good conscience not. We are on the verge of something. But whatever it's
all about. Like I said, and that's one of the things we set out for. We wanted to try as best as we can to accurately portray history. We're not here trying to just come up with something just for clickbait. It's just, that's the whole thing. If we want this to be as best as we can. I mean, if we get it wrong, we get it wrong. You know, let us know. You know, we'll correct the record. But it's one of those, we try to do the best thing. Like this here, I'm not going to tell you Roger Bacon was doing this stuff with a brazen head. No, I'm going to tell you what we know, and we're going to go from there.
Right. And really, you know, even though I take some of these things and put them in my novels, which are fictionalized, they're based in history. So Charles says we have to look because evil still exists. I love this. Whistling past the graveyard will not save us.
Yep.
I've been entering graveyards for a long time, Tanya, and my colleague here. And when I say my esteemed colleague, it's not just a phrase. It's not just an expression. I feel very lucky to have Craig along for the ride here on this, and more so in the future, which is great. So Roger Bacon, you want to give us the broad strokes?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically, I mean, we, you know, like you said, the Dr. Mirabilis, I think is how you pronounce that. Yeah. You know, he was born in 1219, you know, 1219, 1220, lived till, you know, the same thing. Here's another person that lived a long life too back at that time. I mean, 72 years old. I mean, that's really impressive at that time. He died in 1292. Here is another, basically a polymath. I mean, here is another guy who's just, you know, what you'd say like those Renaissance man. I mean, they're just the ones where well learned, just optics. I mean, he was. Well, I'm in the picture. You can see below Joey. That was one of his inventions. Was that magnifying glass? That was his thing. I mean, here's saying. I mean, stuff that we can go buy at the dollar store. That cheap thing out of a package, rip it open, and try not to fry the ants as we're looking at them. It's that stuff that didn't exist, but these geniuses figured out, like, here's a piece of glass, and they were able to do these things, just something that wasn't seen before. And I kind of think where we like that, what he was saying, Charles was saying about whistling past things, is like, if you don't realize these people were called heretics, burned at the stake, killed, hung, drawn in court for the things that we consider, just everyday science that we look around and that we take for granted. And these guys are the ones that went out here. I mean, we're going to talk about some of the more fantastic, we'll use that word. I love it. Fantastical. We'll use some of those fantastical things that he comes out, like we'll talk about here later, the mechanical or the necromantic, brazen head. But that kind of glosses over the fact that he was one of the ones that I've heard him referred to as the first scientist.
Yeah.
It's right, because he came up with the empirical testing. And that's one of the things, if anybody that does science, empirical testing is one of those things that this was, this is an integral part of the scientific process, is these things. And this is one of the things that he came up with this. And so, I mean, here's this guy. And I said, well, as we go through, we're going to get into things, but this is, somebody who comes up with, like I said, the scientific method. He had this, he did a lot of experimental knowledge obtained through his, scholastic traditions. He went to these medieval universities. I think he studied in France, if I'm not mistaken,
Paris
as well too.
Yep.
And this, once again, this isn't. He was born in Leicester, Somerset, England, in early 13th century, but he's not. He's another one of these people. It's not born to a royal aristocratic family. It's just somebody that came up. And so, and this is, I think he studied it, and we'll get into one of the things that I really like is, and it kind of ties into the show we did last night too, is where he really studied with mathematics and stuff as a language. And, you see that kind of that tie where, and I'm going to butcher this statement, but that was one of the things that he fell in. He kind of fell away from the Franciscan monk order, was how, in a way, I think it was the heretic. He was trying to communicate with the divine, and he found that through science, which, blasphemy, blasphemer, throw the rocks at him. So that's enough of me.
So 1241, he was 21, and he got an advanced degree in Paris, what was called a master's degree, similar to what we have now. And he looked at Aristotelian philosophy. This was in 1241. He was the first sort of modern scientist. He studied Aristotelian philosophy. Now, so often during this time and in the precursors, right, in ancient Greece, these guys were polymaths. They studied everything. And I think folks like Craig and I are going back to that. Ronald asked an interesting question. What is the greatest part of history we need to remember? I don't mean this snarky at all. We need to remember and understand as much of it as we can, because it is a pattern. It is a pattern. There are lots of parallels. And the interesting thing here is, in the 1200s, you have the Crusades going on. You really start to have the differentiation. The Jews are being kicked out of Spain. So the religions, the Abrahamic religions, are really starting to fracture. Where for a little while there, early on, for a couple hundred years, they all were working together. The Holy Land was a place where anyone could go and pray, and everyone was respected. The stronger the Catholic Church and other elements got, the more things began to fracture. But this was a chance in the 1200s, the time of the Templars, the time of the Cathars, where you had these scientists coming up. So the alchemists / scientists, if you want to talk about the Muslims, you want to talk about the Jews and the Kabbalists and the alchemists in Europe. This was really a chance to take religion and science and have them side by side. And I think that's the great tragedy. Get that the Catholic Church, this series of popes, and then these emperors, Holy Roman emperors, kings, and all, would get into bed, maybe literally with some of the popes, I don't know, but certainly figuratively and politically, and try to fracture this. And even within the church, and we talked about this last night on Three Beards podcast. Last night I was a guest and we talked about John Dee. Please go back and visit that, because 300 years later, he is picking up and carrying forth Bacon's word. So, so far, you think I'm pretty on the spot there?
Yeah, no, I think so. Absolutely. I have nothing to defer, indifferent on that one. So that's, I really believe it. Just he was the precursor to John Dee. I think his work, as we'll get and I'm sure we'll get to this part where I really feel the more we do it, especially with John Dee, how we saw him with the Enochian language, and I think through Roger Bacon's research and the stuff he did, it's all conjecture. It's like I said, it's not really, there's no proof of this, but I think it honestly, he tapped into something along with this brazen head that we get into. I think during this research, this almost was kind of like the Ouija board, kind of these things. This was used as a divination, as a tool. And I think he was given some of these pieces that would later be used by Edward Kelly and John Dee in creating this thing. And that's why I really think, like I said, I believe that he was, I would say, the forefather, for John Dee and stuff. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So Charles asks a very opportune question here. Did Bacon take anything from the Arab culture or even further east? He did. There's a big debate, and I said this last night on Three Beards because it was stunning. Depending on where you look, you're going to get very different narratives about Roger Bacon and John Dee. You're going to get three kinds of narratives. One, they were devil-worshipping occultics. One, they were just pure scientists and everything else was made up bunk. And then you're going to get the truth, that they were scientists, and part of that science, as Jessica says, she's reading Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. We have a very smart audience, and I feel very honored. Philosophy was a science. Aristotle was a scientist. That was part of the philosophy, systemizing things, genus, species, all of that kind of thing. So we do know that Roger Bacon studied the work of Avicenna and other alchemists from the Middle East and even from the Far East. The debate becomes, is their influence on him exaggerated? Craig, if we think about things like the brazen head and his alchemical laboratory, I don't think they are exaggerated. I just think it's uncomfortable for scientists to go, oh, science isn't just government-funded lab stuff that then can be used to make $1. There, I'm going to say it.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, it's one of those, as anybody that's started getting this thing and you start watching everything, it has these finger connection. It's like, it's got to be connected to the money. It's got to be connected. You can't let something that's against the current narrative where we're wanting to go come out, because it's going to destroy everybody's life work. They're not going to admit it. And I said, that's why whenever new pieces come in, it's so hard to get those to come into the light, because it destroys my tenure that I've just spent the last 40 years at this university building, and this has completely disproven my entire career. There's no way that person's going to let that come forward without a fight.
Right.
And we get like stuff like the brazen head. It sounds crazy. It sounds like Wizard of Oz, smoke coming out the nose. You see these things. But when you start looking through history, the Templars, like the flag behind, they talk about that there was a head. They say it was John the Baptist. Well, what if this device was some sort of divination tool, and they were able to channel somebody like John the Baptist through this device, and they were actually communicating? Because that's where with John Dee and Edward Kelly, they were talking to what they believed to be an angel that gave them the Enochian language. They, gave them this information, gave them little tidbits like, this is the time to flee to Poland because you're about to be arrested. So grab your stuff and, go. So the Templars, I mean, that was the thing, is that they were tipped off. Well, what if this is that same thing? They are communing with us, and whoever's on the other side talking to them is saying, you might want to pack your things and get ready to, head out the door. The ones that believed them, we can talk Oak Island, where, we can go wherever down the rabbit hole. But the ones that didn't are the ones that we know happened on Friday the 13th.
Right. And we're 6 weeks out of Christmas. There's a pretty famous biblical story where someone gets woken up in the middle of the night and says, pack your things, get off your ass and get on your ass, and take your wife and kid out of town because bad things are going to happen. So that's okay because it's in the Bible. But the same messages were given to those other guys. So 1247, he's 27 years old. He returns to Oxford from Paris. So like Craig said, he was born near there. And all of a sudden he starts throwing time, energy, and huge sums of money into experimental research. And this is a big deal at the time, setting up experiments. It's also, Craig, they say he didn't actually do experiments. It was all theoretical. But he was doing experiments. He was an inventor.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's the time. I mean, this is the one. There was a huge conflict between science and religion. These could not coexist. I mean, you got to remember, Galileo is thrown in prison for daring to say that we do not the sun does not circle us. Yeah. This is this is heretic. You are thrown in prison. And it's and you look back on everybody laughs and stuff, and you realize, no, people were killed for the simple things that we learn as kindergartner. Yeah. I always have trouble with that word. It sounds like I'm saying gardener. Kindergarten. I don't know what. We're gonna leave that alone.
Giordano Bruno in 1666 was set on fire, I believe.
Yeah.
I mean, burned like a witch for telling science. Like, are you kidding me? Man's not the center of the universe. Set that guy on fire.
Yeah.
House in prison this guy.
Knowing that if I use this peppermint, if I take these leaves, it's going to ease the stomach.
Yeah.
You have these things. Well, you're a witch. That's witchcraft. That's something. No, this is simply realizing it's like, hey, I'm watching this animal. It seems to have an upset stomach. It keeps eating that, and it seems to feel better. Let me try that. Hey, my God, it works. Witch. And that's where Roger Bacon, that's the area that these people lived in. So the fact that they were even, ballsy enough to set up laboratories, right. And that was, Pope Clement IV, he really gave, he really was the, the wall of protection for Roger Bacon through this time, because he was basically, just don't rock too many boats, do your thing, let me know what you're fighting, because I think he actually, that Pope was really fascinated with the same thing. It's just I think Pope John Paul was the same one. I believe he was really more into science and stuff too. And I think that's where you get a lot of every now and then you get the Pope that that actually realizes these two can coexist.
Right.
And through these things, it's like God created this whole thing. So why are we afraid of studying God's creation? And I think that's, right. So you get those. And I think Pope Clement really was the one that protected him. And when he died, that's when things really started to unravel.
Right. And we're talking about Pope Sylvester, who also went to visit the Saracens, Pope Sylvester.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where Charles was asking about that. And
and John Paul II was also, I think he brought like 2,000 exorcists into the fold. So he was also believed in the reality of evil and demons and possession and things. So it does happen with popes. It's very, very, very interesting. Laura mentions the Anunnaki. I'm fascinated with the Anunnaki. There's so many different origin stories and how maybe the missing link was higher intelligences, ETs, interdimensional beings. mucking with human DNA. Again, a guest that I'm going to have on the end of December is going to talk about that. But there's something about the Anunnaki thing that resonates with me, gold and all that. So just wanted to say that. Herbal medicines, absolutely. MA says, right, not the quest of science then about learning the building blocks of the natural world around them. Yes. It was the quest of science then. And you had to be a polymath. You had to, do a big problem now because of the corporate oligarchy, military, industrial intelligence complex, or the comic, as I call it, is the compartmentalization of everything. Everything is compartmentalized. Communication is frowned upon, whether it's between intelligence agencies, branches of the military. It is shocking to me when I study the military during World War II, what pissing contests there were while Europe was in flames. And you have, the Army Chief of Staff is pissed off at the Navy Chief of Staff. And why did they get that? And why did they get that? It's bullcrap. Where these guys were doing really transdisciplinary studies, which I've been advocating for forever. So that's an excellent point. A kind of exploring the metaphysical world and assigning new ideas and meaning. Absolutely. And those ideas and those meanings were dangerous to the Catholic Church. So the Inquisition comes up. For 10 years, he studied language, optics, like you said, lenses and mirrors, described spectacles, and then they came into use. Had an alchemy lab, studied astronomy and mathematics. So there's that transdisciplinary natural world metaphysics. Let's figure out what the hell is going on and what is our place here. Now, part of the beginning of the demonization of Roger Bacon is because his optics experiments were described as impressive tricks of perspective judged by others to have been done by power of evil spirits. And I have that in the Old English. So that's a quote from way back when. Oh, what? I don't understand it, therefore it's evil.
Yep. Yeah,
like that's
exactly.
Not familiar. That's really what it was. And that was a mathematician in the 1500s named Robert Ricord. So even in the 1500s, right, we have the benefit of Da Vinci, we have all these things, and still they're saying power of evil spirits. He used a camera obscura, using projecting an image through a pinhole to look at eclipses of the sun. That's important stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
but I mean, eclipses. Right? Go ahead.
Yeah, no. I was just going to say those things, with that opus mages that he created. Saying Charles' question, it's like he even used ancient and Arabic computations of longitude and latitude. Yeah. Which these ones, because in the same time, I mean, especially during there in the Arab world, they were huge on mathematics and science. This was it was kind of weird. It was like to the north, it was like you had to be afraid of this, but to the south, of the Mediterranean, this was like embraced. It was like everybody. I mean, everybody was just like, boom, just like more knowledge, we're going to do all these books. And there's been rumors that that's part of what the conflict was about.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
In the Crusades, it wasn't just so simple as like, your version of, you following the gourd and me following the shoe. Like I used it, it was the reason for these battles. I think there was much more behind it than just something simple as a doctrine that it was. Yeah.
Absolutely. Because you're thinking, the councils and Constantine and the building of the Byzantine Empire, and Constantine, what he did was to appease his people. He took the Mithraic and other ancient Roman religions and sort of morphed them into a package of what looked like Christianity. I'm really starting to believe that in some of the recent research that I've been looking at. So it was all a dog and pony show to stay in power. It was the old Pax Romana, appease the people, give them enough of what they're used to, but packaged in your own way so that they'll shut up. That's where the English screwed up in their empire. They didn't do enough of that. They suppressed people. For the Scots, the Highlanders, they took away their last names, they took away their guns, they took away their clan dress. So it wasn't published until 1597, which is interesting, the time of our old friend John Dee. But he wrote a book called The Mirror of Alchemy, and he talks about Hermes Trismegistus, Hermes thrice great, who wrote the great Hermetical texts of Egypt, and called him the master initiate, whose words he took as final authority on every subject. That's probably an exaggeration. Bacon had a very curious mind, so I don't think he was just taking the words of Hermes thrice great. You know what I mean? But no, it had a heavy impact on him.
Well, yeah, I think so too. It's one of those. He was one of those that it seemed like he wasn't stuck on a philosophy. He didn't seem to have an agenda.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to apologize. I got the dogs barking in the background for everybody. So sorry about that audio if anybody's hearing that. But that's one of the things that really looks like is he, which I think would work because he came up with basically the scientific method, which would make sense that he would not come at it from a predetermined thing. It's basically, I have this. What does this do? Okay, let me write that down. And he figured, he would come through this thing. He didn't come with this idea like, this is what it is. Okay, now let me figure out how to prove it that that's what it is. No, it's like he literally was. And so I think you're right on the money. Where it's just he would take from this, and pull through it, and then he would do that connect, the parallels and patterns. So So he would take those things and he would find out where these things cross over. And when you find that spot, that's where, because I tell people that all the time, take this and this, cross them over, wherever you have those intersections, that's where the truth lies.
Yeah.
Because because you can't hide that fact that those two things coexist. And I think that's what he did. When you take the Northern scholars, you take the Arabic scholars, and you find out it's like, here's where they have in common. And Roger Bacon, to me, through my research, he literally was a master of doing this part, when it comes to the research. I wish there was more information on him, but we're talking the early 13th century.
Right.
There really wasn't that good of record keeping.
No, and there was a lot of reason to suppress what he did, because in 1257, at 37 years old, he does an interesting thing, and this is the big mystery of the night to me. He enters the order of Friars Minor. He becomes a Franciscan, right? The followers of Saint Francis of Assisi. He's in ill health at the time, and he fades from public view. Prior to this, he was a lecturer. He was a public figure. So maybe he went there to get, to recuperate, because they would take care of him. But he soon undertakes what's described as feverish activity. He starts to embrace what is termed superstition. And he's very opinionated about the church and about his fellow friars, about his fellow scholars. He had a lot of opinions. He was very vocal. He was just one of these guys. And so he was constantly disciplined. He called his fellow scholars and many members of the church, all the way up to the Pope, for a time, fools, ignorant of philosophy and metaphysics, whose writings are full of puerile vanity and voluminous superfluidity. He said that the church was morally corrupt. 200 years in, the church was already morally corrupt, which it was. I mean, look at the Crusades. They were shady AF. They were more about problem solving than reclaiming, lands that belonged, so to speak, to the Christians. Then he said this, a Franciscan friar: God is a principle, man is a god.
Yeah, and that's, and instantly you can see how that would cause problems.
Yeah, and this is also the time of the Cathars, who were saying, Jesus was a human. He was not divine. God does not split apart into various, you can't take the great source and fracture it. So this gives rise, and I'm going to go on for a little bit more, Craig. I apologize.
Oh, no, you're good.
Three kinds of heresy rise up during this time. Intellectual heresy. This is the rise of the universities. This is the rise of knowledge to students, which now the universities are controlled by the corporate money, right? What's called private-public partnerships. Yep. The laboratories, the law schools, the medical schools. Spiritual heresy. So now we're talking about the Cathars and we're talking about the Knights Templar. Just like Adam and Eve with the fruit of knowledge, some knowledge is not your damn business, according to the church. Right? So, MA says that was a radical statement. It absolutely was. All of it was very radical at the time. Then there's philosophical heresy. This is Averroism. And it is directly opposed to the idea of a creative deity, right? Man is the creative force. God's a principle. It's an idea. It's I would say, an inspiration. The light of inspiration is this idea of God, but man has to do the work. So Averroes and two Jewish rabbis on the Kabbalism side, they really create this Averroism. Now, Frederick the Great, emperor, so on and so forth, he espoused this philosophy. And he was excommunicated for it. Now, Frederick II is important because between 1198 and 1225, he was the king of Germany, the king of Italy and the Holy Roman Empire, the king of Sicily, and the king of Jerusalem during the Crusades, during part of the Crusades. So this is a really, really important guy. You want to take over from when he, or comment on any of that if you want, but take over from when he contacts Clement, goes right to the top.
Well, that's, that was part, right after, Pope Clement, that's when he really seems to be, almost like set free. Mm-hmm. It's like, I don't have to be afraid, because it seems like that's when a lot of his more incredible experiments, including, like I said, right now might be a perfect time to really get into like the brazen head.
Sure.
And those ones too. One of the ones, like before we get into the brazen head, I want to talk to you about the Philosopher's Stone. Because there's a report like he came, and through the research, I'm wondering. I want to bounce this off to you. Do you think it was an actual physical object? Because it's philosophy, and so I'm wondering if it's an idea. It's it's the knowledge. It's not so much like a physical. This object is what's going to be able to create this. It's that. Right. And so why it's called a stone, that part I can't get around. But
yeah, and it's weird because the Grail was a stone that fell out of Lucifer's crown, according to Otto Rahn and the Cathars and Parzival, which I'm reading right now. Not Percival. It was a platter in that, but it was this stone, and it really hooked Otto Rahn and all these people. I've been studying alchemy for, I guess, 20, 25 years, and I do believe it's spiritual. At its core, it's about spiritual connectedness. The Negredo, the raw matter, is to bring something forth out of the void. So these guys were shouting into the void to bring something forth. I love the Rush lyric, drag the dream, we'll drag the dream into existence. They're calling out into the void, out into this darkness, this inspiration, and they're pulling something forth. I think that there were charlatans, and there were those who took alchemy and turned it into this idea of transmuting base matter into gold. To me, it's a metaphor, man.
Oh, yeah.
I'll stick by that.
Yeah, and it's I really do. It's through the work shows that we've done together, I'm really starting to get this idea that a lot of this stuff is not a physical. There's not, I feel like a broken record sometimes. I don't feel it's a physical treasure anymore. I really feel that a lot of this was knowledge. There's like you're talking about the Grail, possible Philosopher's Stone. What if these are all one and the same? Kind of like they're attributed to the search for knowledge has always been deemed evil
Yeah.
and something from the time of the Garden of Eden. I've always, that's one of the passages that I've always questioned myself is it's just as a parent, I don't want my kid to have, sweets before, dinner. I said no, sugar before dinner. So does it make more sense for me to just not have anything on the counter, or while he's sitting there, I'm going to put his favorite dessert or desserts that he loves, and I'm going to set it in a bowl right in front of him. And then I'm going to get all mad when I turn around and he's got his hand in there grabbing something.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm like, anybody would be the same thing. If I came to you and I said, here is a book that has all the knowledge you're ever going to want, it's going to answer every question, do not open it. There's going to be very few people that are never going to crack that open. You're going to be like, heck yeah, you're going to rip open. I'm like, oh my God. And that's one of those passages that, when you see those things, and that's where I'm starting to think is that, what if this Philosopher's Stone, the great, all these things are tied into something that is this forbidden knowledge. And these pieces are, as Roger Bacon, John Dee, these guys were starting to tap into this divine knowledge, this divine, where we want to call it the Akashic record, just whatever term, it fits for people. But there seems to be this commonality where this seems to be something that we're not supposed to have. And the people that start to tap into it are a threat to the very existence of what we've built. This marble palace behind me is threatened. So I must shut this down. This must be deemed as evil. And so I'm really wondering if that's one of the, these might all be interconnected, even though they have different stories. But like I said, do I think it literally fell from Satan's crown? I don't know. I mean, it's, that could be a metaphor. I mean, we don't know.
It's this two side. I agree with you. The more I'm reading, the Parsifals and looking at Walter Stein and reading Trevor Ravencroft's Spear of Destiny. They were metaphors. They were encoded metaphors for initiation and moving up through, right? What were Dee and Kelly doing? They were using the 19 Enochian calls to try to open the 30 ethers. Mm-hmm. If these are just like going through the tarot, going through the Kabbalistic tree of life, any kind of path working, you're moving to different stages. You're up leveling. Right? In the age of video games, we call it up leveling. And you're going through initiations. The danger becomes, and I don't know if you know this, we didn't bring it up with Nazi occult. Hitler, pre-World War I, was taking meth, not meth, it's in peyote kind of.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
The other M, you know what I'm talking about.
I mean, they were giving the troops meth. I mean, you had that part,
but I mean, way before that, he was taking peyote with this bookseller. So this whole rise of this: do we take the shortcut? Do we worship darkness, sell our souls to get there faster, or do we go through the levels of initiation, which take time, which take practice? And I really like
that. I never even really thought about that.
That's what I'm really hooked
DMT,
into,
peyote, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It could be a shortcut, and that could be why some people have such an adverse reaction to the encounter, because you're not prepared.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's like taking a brand new infant to a Vegas casino. You've got all the lights, but if anybody's taken to something like a carnival, you see their eyes just bugging out because they don't know how to process all this flashing, all these sounds. And I've wondered if that's what it's like, where just if you cut steps, you're not prepared, and it's just like an overload.
Yeah.
And so I mean that's a really good way to do it. It's like, I think it's kind of like a shortcut where it's like you're just skipping a step, and I like that.
But there is, like with ayahuasca and what Laura's saying here, the natives use peyote. Obviously, yes, there
Mhm.
are entire churches of peyote and all of that, but there's still ritual. You know, I had a sweat lodge on my property. We went through ritual. We didn't take these kind of drugs, you know, magic mushrooms, but that was always the big conversation. It had to be done in a ritualistic manner, not for selfishness, and certainly not as a power grab.
Yeah,
Because
well, that'd
you're
be the shaman
saying,
and you. I mean, that'd be the
yeah,
difference. The shaman
yeah,
is the one that took the path, trained, knows these things, and giving it to you. I didn't take the same path. Yes, I'm going
right,
to be, I'm going to have that experience,
yeah,
but in way, like I said, I agree. It's like a shortcut. It's like if I just like, I don't really want to take the studying to become the shaman, I don't want to do the Roger Bacon path of take all this time, search all this stuff out. I just want to
right,
try this and like, oh wow,
yeah.
you kind of, it's, yeah. I mean, I kind of like it. I mean, it fits. I mean,
So far it does, and the more that I'm reading, that's the common theme that I'm seeing, and over and over and over, the natives were suppressed. I don't think it was just about land. It's about philosophy in any culture. What the Spaniards did, coming in as the Catholics and wiping out, cultures that were very hooked into larger cosmological initiations and path workings and all of that, and there was darkness and all of that, an element of human sacrifice, and not nothing. Very few things are totally pure.
mhm.
But by and large, there's a difference between the shortcut and doing what guys like D did, what Roger did. So I'm going to hold off the brazen head a little.
Oh yeah,
I
no,
just
I
want
just
to.
got it prepared.
Well, let's say this. In 1260, Roger Bacon wrote a book proposing flying machines with flapping wings, motorized ships, and carriages. This is 3 centuries before Da Vinci. Three
Yep.
centuries before Da Vinci. Now, mechanical stuff. I'm going to pass it over to you. There's the handoff.
Yeah, and so I said I've got one of the pictures up there for people. It's this is the brazen head. That it's
I'm going to
what.
take myself out so people can see it.
Oh, okay, yeah, you could just possibly it's because you got to click on that one. It's not going to work for me. But anyway, it's the brazen head. You got to this is one of the inventions where it's called brazen head due to the fact that it was made from. Is it clicking on there? Does it work if you just
It
click?
wouldn't work. It just makes you huge.
Oh, okay. So,
Yeah.
well, we're just. Let's see. If anybody, you can look up brazen head, and you'll get it here. So I'm not sure it's not bringing it up. So I apologize to everybody here. But what the premise of it is? This was a mechanical thing that supposedly was brought to him by Sylvester, Pope, that brought back from his thing with the Saracen. He brought back this knowledge, and this was everybody knows like the Zoltar machines, from Big. Just we've got the carnival games where you put your coins in there, it starts talking and it spits out a fortune card. And it's everybody. Those are kind of the modern, integration of what the brazen head was. Well, this one was supposedly that he created that was almost anatomically correct down to even like the brain. I mean, it just everything was here, and it was something that was able to, when you ask it questions, it was able to tell reply, in coherent and stuff. And one of the quotes, and I thought this was kind of funny for me, was that when it supposedly worked, he was asleep.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, and what it had said was, time is past, quoth the brazen head. And that was supposedly what it is. And I also heard one like his goal was to build, a solid brass, wall around all of it, to protect against the Spanish Armada, whether or not that was real or not. But it also reports were that they had created a full-size like body and all, and that it was so talkative that one of the priests that was assisting him actually went in and destroyed it to shut it up because it
Right.
wouldn't stop. It would just kept talking. And one of those, and you think back here, I mean, it's almost one of those things in science where the people that don't know what it is and they just destroy it, and you're just like, I'm like, you just in modern time, you're thinking, how cool would that have been if somebody was just actually taking notes, just writing it down, if this worked like it said.
Right.
But that was definitely, with the story behind it, for me, really is just because this worked for his through his alchemical works, but they also attributed it to necromancy, because there's also, through some, it's kind of hearsay. I mean, I don't really, it's the sources that I saw this on are worse to quote than Wikipedia.
Right.
Yeah, because for anybody who knows, Wikipedia is a really bad source to use because anyone can edit and add stuff in, and so unless people catch it, it's like, so it's really easy to just throw some crazy stuff in there.
Yeah.
But there's talk that what was behind the brass was an actual head, and that
I did not read that.
Yes, and that this is through necromancy.
Mhm.
This was the reanimation through the process of like bringing that head back to life.
Yeah.
And it's trapped inside this vessel, and it's being forced to communicate from the other side. And that's what I said. I don't know if this is more like a fan theory where you have like those wikis where but that's some of the stuff I saw, and it was a different one. But unfortunately, like I said, all we really have is hearsay, like what was created, that this is what supposedly happened. But this is also the Franciscan, they're not going to record this stuff. These records aren't kept. These records are destroyed. So we're just basically oral tradition, oral story that was handed down. And we all know how that happens, where I caught a fish like this, but this was the, Moby Dick was, was on the line, it's just, yeah.
So it's tough for us. So I'm a playwright, and one of the first lessons I learned in the power of playwriting is when Tanya and I were studying Mothman, and there's supposedly the cornstalk curse that cursed the town of Point Pleasant in the 1700s. But when you really look into it, the first thing you find is that they stormed into Fort Randolph, kicked in the door, and shot him. There was no time for a curse. Then you find out that in a centennial play, or a sesquicentennial play, I forget which one, it was in a play. And that's where it originated from. And all these years later, 200 years later, people are still talking about cornstalk's curse. Well, there is no contemporary evidence that Roger Bacon did a brazen head, but it appears in 2 or 3 plays exactly how you described it, Craig. But we can say this. You talked about a priest who made a full body. This wasn't just any priest. It was Albertus Magnus.
Yep.
He spent 30 years creating this man of brass, full-bodied man of brass that could answer any question. It reminds me of a tulpa. So you can create a thought form that then actually manifests on this plane, and it grows and educates and becomes something else over time. And that's what this sounds like. It became so loquacious. It became so ceaselessly talkative that Thomas Aquinas was the one who knocked the head off the thing.
Yeah, I mean, it literally was a brass golem. I mean, it's what they created.
Exactly,
I mean,
right. And it was a form of AI, as Jessica said. And interestingly enough, MA said something about, that's in dolls, objects, and modern movies. But think about it. We're moving into the age of these AI dolls, hyper-realistic robots, androids, eventually cyborgs. So we've jumped 800 plus years, and we're there. Except it's not magic anymore, right? Arthur C. Clarke said any kind of technology that's progressed to a certain level is magic. It's just that we know so much now that we don't believe in magic at all. You're nuts. You're crazy. You're a witch. You're an occultist.
Which in a way isn't, how about we kind of come almost in a way like reverse to where secularism has become, in a way, the religion.
Yeah.
And to the people that practice like the occult, it's back to the same thing. It's now you've gone almost, it's created like the new religion that is against, this alternate, research. And it's kind of funny how you come that way, because it's the same thing. You think you'd more embrace it, because I've been that way. It's just, we've all talked about the things, everything behind me. I've got the keys of Solomon. Also, nothing is inherently dangerous.
Right.
It's just, it's how what you do with this. I mean, it's just, my dislike of Ouija board. I mean, it's something I just don't want to have behind me, but it's just in itself, it just sits there. It's not going to do anything. But if I actually start using it, yes, now you've done, you've used it for this tool. You do the incantations. I start lighting candles and, haphazardly just draw, and open up a portal. And next thing I know, my cup's flying at my head. Well, it's my own fault.
Yeah.
Because I didn't do my due diligence. And that's where I said, these guys, it is, oh man, if you could go in the time machine, how cool would that be to go back and actually see a talking brass head?
And I don't know, maybe some of us were there. I gave you that weird revelation about my potentially being a Templar in the 1200s.
Yeah.
Who knows? We don't know. We don't know where our
You're smuggling out the brazen head.
Yeah, previous lives, and that's another thing, right? But Charles says perhaps the head was a placeholder for ideas from somewhere else, like channeling, automatic writing, remote viewing. I think so. Effigies are powerful. Effigies are absolutely powerful. Whether you're burning them, whether you're employing them for voodoo or things like that, just recreating that form can give it power. We were talking about that with D last night. I really do encourage everyone, not just for views on our part, because I think it was a very interesting, genuinely interesting discussion. So these brazen heads are talked about in the 12th century Chronicle of Kings of England by William of Malmesbury. And then what Craig alluded to in 999, Gerbert of Aurillac, who becomes a pope. Pope Sylvester II, and I won't do the accent this time, he went to Spain to learn astrology, other sciences from the Saracens. He stole a book of spells, reportedly, from a Saracen philosopher before making a pact with the devil, and that was the rise to the papal throne. Now, is this propaganda from his enemies? Where does what he actually did become? Because they said the same thing about Bacon. When he couldn't get the head to work, he turned to the devil for help. I don't believe that for a second.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like one of these things, because where we talked about, because one of the things we talked about too was in one of our shows was with the Nazi occult thing.
Yep.
Himmler's castle. They had the chamber down below where they had the circle, and there was a focal point. What if it's the same type of thing? They have, because he came up with the death head rings. Yeah. So, which comes around a head. You've got the Templars. They worshipped, I don't even want to say worshipped. They revered supposedly the head of John the Baptist. You got Roger Bacon. He, they said he's got the necromantic, head, the brazen head. What if this is one of the things that in the show, I could do like the thing. Is this possibly down there in the well in Oak Island? We could do one of those things. This could be one of the artifacts that was smuggled out. This could be one of the things that's that the actual, like the treasure type thing. I mean, this one of those things. This could be an endure thing, but it would make sense that if somebody like the Nazis, who were so obsessed with the occult, maybe they found this information, some of this stuff that Roger Bacon had found, and they were able to recreate in a way like like a brazen head.
Right.
And they had to, because that's one of those things. There's all these talk. We don't know what what the actual object was in the center, but maybe this is one of those possibilities.
I agree. Just catching up here. Radical Islam went on a cleansing spree a few years back, destroying archaeological, iconic, and historic documents and monuments. And I really like this here because we were talking about it last night. The Egyptians were known when a new ruler came in, destroyed the tablets and statues of the prior ruler to destroy their thoughts and ideas. We talked about this with Dee because when Queen Elizabeth died, James the First destroyed Dee's life, pretty much. For that same reason, he came in and he was very radical. He abhorred witchcraft. He abhorred the occult. He thought they tried to kill his wife by conjuring a storm, his soon-to-be wife. And so, absolutely, Laura, absolutely. Just private message me on Facebook, and I'll send you my notes from tonight and from last night too. Really, it should be, we're asking people to join Patreon to help fund all of this, and then we'll send you notes. But if you ask, I give. You don't ask, I don't give. You ask, I give.
Yeah,
Spread the knowledge.
It's an easy email.
Yeah, so if you send an instant message, I'll go ahead and send you those notes. But anyway, he did have a friend, Bacon, in Pope Clement IV, who he knew from way back when in France, is the theory. So the Franciscans are just kicking his ass. They are using terrible weapons of spiritual coercion, is what the written record says, because of what he's doing. So he reaches out to the Pope and he says this. He says, if we understand the natural world, mathematics, language, astrology, if we codify it, if we put it in encyclopedias, this will help the church. It will strengthen the church. Science can strengthen religion. That's another really radical statement. We are the gods. We have the knowledge. And if we package it correctly for people, the church will look that much smarter, that much connected, that much more in understanding. And so the Pope goes, okay, send me all you got. And Bacon kind of goes, well, I was hoping that you could kind of fund this. So they had a little bit of a miscommunication. So in secret, on top of all his daily Franciscan duties, Bacon creates these 3 books. And when his superiors find out what he's done, they really punish him quite severely. What this terrible spiritual coercion, I can only imagine. It's probably what the Knights Templar went through, Jacques de Molay and some of those other guys, locked away and subjected to the Inquisition and to these bishopric councils and these archbishop cardinal councils. Jacques de Molay was a broken man by the end of all of it. He could hardly put a sentence together. So they're breaking him down, and then 2 years later, Clement dies. And the project is halted, and he does some work on his own for the next 4 years before he's imprisoned.
Yeah, Laura, on to that question, yes, Clement, he could trust.
Yes.
This him for sure. The Pope afterwards, no. Yeah, I mean, I said this one, no, but definitely at that point, that was like we talked about a little earlier. He was definitely the shelter for Roger Bacon. I mean, he basically created this, as we use today's terms, the safe space that allowed him, to go the routes that he wanted to go.
Right. So MA says Hitler was also an artist. Yes, he was. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's easy to look up.
And one of the paintings that really got that he was selling when he was like out on the street and bedraggled and didn't get into the art thing, and he was getting kicked out of the DOS houses because his clothes and his body were so smelly, was the Spear of Longinus, that he would go in Austria to the museum and stare at this. It was being held by the Habsburgs, and he thought that spear spoke to him. But in drawing it, just in the act of drawing it in detail to sell it, did it speak to him, quote unquote, even before he took the peyote? You know what I mean? And that's when he really thought it was happening. Yeah, he could trust the Pope. He was okay. So I'll put the Patreon up here in the chat room, guys. You can do what you want with it. Patreon, every day is a story all its own, because I truly do believe that. Every day, tell your story. You got 7 chances a week, Craig, to reinvent your story. If you don't like the characters in it, if you don't like the place, if you don't like the problem, you can move on. So, Clement dies. So he's imprisoned. You want to talk about that?
I really didn't get too much into that, into that part of him. I was focused more on up to this part where it just all the accusations of the only reason this was succeeded was because this is through the assistance of a demon, Satan, I want to say it was Sylvester, that he was accused of playing a game of dice with the devil in order to achieve this information. And I've often wondered, is we talked a little bit about before, where it's one of those, it always seems to be, if it's something to be feared or something like that, it's work of the devil, it's demonic, it's something like that. To me, it's like, whether in paranormal field, I don't care what you look at, just because it's unknown doesn't automatically make it evil,
right?
So you hear this 3 knocks, like everybody's, it was a demon. Not necessarily. It could have been a woodpecker on the other side of the house. It's like, it doesn't mean it was a demon. It just means that something knocked. And then if things come through with it, then you can start bringing in more evidence that can lead you to a better theory. And then but I think just too many people are apt to, it's unknown, therefore it's evil and scary.
Right.
And that's what they go through. Because I think, I want to say, almost like human nature, it seems to be, that's the easiest way to compartmentalize. If it's unknown and scary, it's it's easier to say, okay, that's that's evil, that's scary, I don't want anything to do, boom, you can just put it away. And then it's just because you've already labeled it, and now it's, but I don't, do I believe, do I think Pope, I mean, during that time, they were, I mean, let's be honest, most of them were corrupt. I mean, it was all about power. I don't think it had anything to do with a dice game with the devil. I think it's like we talked about. I think he knew that there was information that the Saracens had. And, they had something cool. They probably said they have this cool thing that can talk and can potentially tell the future. Okay, I want to go see it. And when they see it, it's like, oh heck yeah, I want that. And so you bring it back to the Pope Sylvester. It's now, what do? You have something you don't understand. So who do you bring it to? Maybe the guy that's considered the top scientist, Roger Bacon. Here's this thing, do something with it, make it work, make it happen, do your stuff. It just, that's one of my favorite movie lines. Anybody can tell me what movie that's from? That's all right.
Y'all think about that. So not unlike the lamp, you rub the lamp and the genie comes out, right? The genie is contained passively in this head. So Gerbert, Pope Sylvester II, the head tells him this. It tells him that he would only die after singing mass in Jerusalem. So if you don't want to die, Sylvester, if you want to live forever, if you want to have immortality, and that was the big goal, right? With the corrupted, let's call it the corrupted alchemy. The corrupted alchemy was to somehow live forever. Although, if you spiritually ascend, you also have immortal life. It's just not about earthly power and materialism. So either way, the goal is, right, to break the wheel of samsara, to stop the reincarnation cycle, to ascend to another. Craig, you and I are going to have a guest on who's championing a book that was written like 30 years ago by a guy who was purportedly spent 9 years on an ascended planet. And even they were talking about 9 planets, 9 levels of ascension. And this is ET intelligence, right?
Yep.
So anyway, death nevertheless caught him by surprise after having sung mass not in the city of Jerusalem, but the Jerusalem church in Rome. That so sounds like a genie in the lamp, careful what you wish for, be very specific, tricksterism kind of thing. So there is definitely, I think, that aspect. There's so much cool stuff going on here. Amy Jo says, I don't believe in any time that a person who obtains the extreme power of knowledge and writes about it or even discloses the knowledge somehow can trust anyone. I agree with that. Would you believe with this little show here, which is not reaching millions of people by any stretch of the imagination,
Yet.
People are contacting me and saying, be careful, you're being watched. So anytime you're gathering knowledge, you're packaging it in a parallels and patterns kind of way to go, look at this. Look at how these things are connected.
It's my fault.
You're gonna no, it was actually after I did the solo disclosure show.
Oh, yeah.
So you can't really take credit for that. But if we keep going the way we're going, so I do agree with Amy Jo. And obviously, even if though he could trust the Pope, it was his own fellow Franciscans that imprisoned him for suspected novelties in his teaching. It's like Socrates all over again.
I think it's one of those things. It's like, I mean, I don't want to, just outright say they're a secret society, but it's almost like you're giving out information you're not supposed to give out.
Yeah.
So we have to shut you up.
You're breaking
and so
the code.
The easiest way at that time to say you've created sins against the Father, you were a blasphemer, you are a heretic, therefore we're going to put you in prison. And most people at the time would be like, oh wow, man, I don't want to be around that guy. And you've officially, that was original cancel culture. You canceled them out. It was just, and it's a shame.
You put them in a place where they can't talk.
Yeah, that's what I think. A lot of it was just, I think we kind of hinted these things, because you even asked that question. It's like, why would he join this one? And I think it was because he was a consummate researcher. I think they had information, and it was trying to in order to get this information, you had to be part of the order. It's like some of those people that they want the information on the Freemasons. So you got to join Freemasonry. That's it. There's like, you want to be this, you got to join with this group. And I think that was part of one of those things. It's like he joined them, but at the same time, it's like, I'm sure he knew the risk. Mm-hmm. But it was what I think that was my take. Is I want to say it's just it's the only way you could get access to the library is if you were a monk. Mm-hmm. You can't just walk in the monastery. You actually have to be part of the order. Yeah.
Yeah, and that could be. I know I've incorporated the Franciscans up to some shady stuff, and the Dominicans and all the rest of them. Bernard of Clairvaux, who started the Cistercian order, he was extremely powerful. He was picking popes left and right. He was the ones who put the Knights Templar on the map, that went and traveled and advocated for them, got them funded, got, everything from the Kingdom of France to Aragon to England on board with them. So these guys were very, very powerful, these religious orders. When I said nothing has necessarily changed its cycles and repeats. And I think I don't curse a lot on this show, so I'm going to say it. From the meta level to the micro level, the cycle of shit. Families experience cycles of shit. Sometimes in our own lives, we appear cycles of shit. This country has gone through endless cycles of shit, and we happen to be in a really bad one right now. Next Tuesday is going to be important to watch. And hopefully you could still watch us on Wednesday and Thursday. And but we need to break it. And I do think that it's the knowledge that is being suppressed on all areas. And I was reading it just the other day. Do you know that 6 corporations control 90% of the media? You probably knew that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's crazy, and a lot of it's consolidated. I mean, and it keeps being though. I mean, probably one of the craziest things. I mean, I don't know if you saw, they blocked that merger of that publishing company.
I didn't.
Yeah, so that was the one. It was It's that long one. I think Penguin was part of it. It was
Oh,
going to be that mega publisher, but they
uh-huh.
blocked it and said no. I mean, it was just so that was. I mean, that was one right step in, in opening it up for the freedom. But yeah, it's. I mean, there's no wonder why. It doesn't matter what channel you turn on, everything always has the same headline.
Yeah. Oh, that's exactly it. And
Yeah.
it was a great revelation to me when I realized that, there are left-wing and right-wing newspapers, and that Time and Newsweek were on opposite ends of the political spectrum. So you could read the same story in both of them and get a completely different version of the story. And of course, the 24-hour news cycle, right? It's like CNN versus Fox, and then you have the other players. The alphabet channels were 1% corporate-owned media, tool of one specified political party. Yeah. So,
Ronald, we'll have to do a clip like that, and we'll just be able to play it whenever, Joey's first cuss word.
Any reason. Yeah, any reason. Ronald said it. Yeah, we don't want to give them any reason to pinch down these videos. We work really hard on them. And
no, I think that's one of the biggest things is, with all this stuff, the talk of the misinformation, you go through these things, as long as you keep it to like these things. I mean, it's historical. There's no claims in here. I mean, I've the only one that I would say remotely that I've made a claim that probably can't be the best verified would be the fact that there's the report of that it was a real head inside of the brass. Yes. And that's one of those things. But, that being said, there was no, there's nothing. And that's where, when you said in the beginning of the show, we try our best to give you a historical breakdown, show this stuff. And that's where the Sinister, mysteries apart from it. It doesn't mean that Roger Bacon was sinister. It's just we try to find that little thread where there is something sinister behind, this, and it looks like it was somewhere tied in between the Franciscans and the Vatican. There was a sinister plot to shut Roger Bacon up.
Yeah.
And, and that's kind of where it was. And it was just, that's where we go. So it's, what do we do? It brought Joey to a swear word. All right, yay, it happens.
And it was really kind of corollary. I was it was fine. And I could swear with the best of them, trust me.
Come to Three Beards, you'll hear swears all the time.
Final thoughts on Roger Bacon?
Genius.
Yeah. Absolutely a genius.
I wish there was more, but like I said, there's the 1200s. I mean, there's not a lot of records coming out of here. He's one of those where it's like Da Vinci. I really wish we knew more about the day and daylight of, these geniuses, because I mean, what it would be like to be there in the workshop with Da Vinci and Roger Bacon. I mean, I said that would have to be some pretty cool, I'll use my word, cool ass, experiences. Yeah. There we go.
There you go. We're off to the races. We're off to the damn races now.
Come to Three Beards. So,
as we're closing out, so thank you for tuning into these, giving us the the energy to because I don't know, I spend hours and hours and hours prepping for these Sinister mysteries, and I'm sure you do too.
Yes,
but well worth it. Yeah, if there wasn't, John D and a lot of other people carried on this man's work, so it's all right and good. We didn't mention it, but he is, Craig, another one of our Sinister mysteries. And folks, you're going to see a tapestry over time. We're going to try to interlink organically as much of this stuff as we can. But like John D, Roger Bacon in the early 1900s, Voynich, for whom the manuscript was named, said that it was the Roger Bacon manuscript. That was the theory, which has since been debunked. There you go. Right there. But, when he was talking about his head, the brazen head, just real quickly, Satan supposedly told him that the head would speak after a few weeks as long as it was powered by the continual fume of the 6 hottest simples, a selection of plants used in alchemical medicine. It is interesting that the Voynich manuscript is in part a botanical guide, tied to astronomy, astrology, cosmology, all of it. So the pieces are there, and Craig and I are going to do our damnedest to keep putting the pieces together. And then
Yeah, because John Dee, he says, they said it's attributed to Roger Bacon. Is where he got this thing from. So what if this brazen head was a tie, and he actually got some of this? Brazen head may have, I mean, this is potentially could be, when you see the script, I mean, that could be the language that head was speaking the entire time, and it gave it to him, and that's where. But at the same time, it could be a great hoax.
Yeah,
we don't know. These are geniuses. I mean, it'd be real easy to come up with a constructed language like this. Tolkien did it. I mean, it would be
right.
So I really think so. But I mean, it's I appreciate everybody's great words. It's like we really appreciate you guys. Think it's a fabulous conversation. I mean, it's that's the goal. That was the whole part of it. Was just we enjoy each other's company. Like I said, we enjoy these topics, and we wanted to make sure that you would come up with some information that you're not really getting from a whole lot of other shows. We wanted it to be something kind of cool, something different. I mean, Joey is meticulous in his research. I'm an ADHD cracked out squirrel.
I don't know about that. We make an excellent team.
I'm all over the place.
And you always bring that one nugget that I miss. You always dig a foot deeper down.
Yeah.
So when someday we have our own show where we're out actually in the world, actually digging, you're gonna go, Joey, stick around and go the extra foot with me. And I'm never gonna say no.
We'll find that one crazy thing.
So thank you all so much. We really appreciate it. Thank you again for all the birthday wishes. I think tomorrow's going to be a good day, and our sons are coming over with their girlfriends on Saturday. It'll be nice. We're just getting old and all of that good stuff. So next week, Mark Fiorentino comes back. Master of Reality is his book. Look at this. Boom. Took me a long time to read this baby. All physics. You think the speed of light is constant? It's a lie. This book talks about so much cool stuff, guys. Mark was on the show. He was so popular. I'm bringing him back. We've become friends. Tomorrow, he and I are talking off screen about some very cool stuff, and maybe he'll talk about it on screen. It's kind of out there stuff, but that's what we love. So everybody take care. Have a great night, and thank you all so much. We'll see you soon.